In this episode of In Conversation series, we are extremely happy to present to you a practitioner from the area of market research, management consulting, and understanding consumer. And we will get to know more about the way the guest would like to sort of describe her own work as we continue the conversation. Ms. Rama Bijapurkar is a thought leader in the area of consumer research, a person who has spent almost all her entire professional life in understanding the Indian consumer, and has spent several years on the boards of blue chip companies in India, has spent about 10 years on the board of Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, the prestigious institute where she did her post-graduation. She herself is a physics graduate from Delhi University, and that's an added bit of a trivia. And I have a couple of comments to make on that along the course of the conversation. And on behalf of all the students at the Physics Chamber, their parents, and the few thousands of students who follow us on the social media, ma'am, very happy to have you here and welcome.
Ajay, thank you. It is a privilege to be here. I think you do some really special work, and I'm very excited to be a part of your show.
Thank you, ma'am. Students, just for the record, when I reached out to ma'am for this specific interaction, she's replied that she would love to do this. It's not like that she would be willing to be part of it. So I think that is something, and it is my guess she will have to respond that it may not be an everyday affair for her to be talking to this young group. She's a faculty at the Indian Institute of Management, of course, but that's very elder group of students. Would I be right, ma'am?
You're absolutely right. But I also must say that what excited me even more, Ajay, to tell you the truth, is the fact that people like you are doing such things for this age group, because I always feel that had there been more guidance, more people who would share and inform, then I think that a lot of people would have less angst, get it right more often, and generally be more relaxed and contented. So I do counsel a lot of parents, but then mostly within friends and families. So I was really excited with the work that you were doing, and I said I would love to be a part of it in whatever small way I can. But yes, I'm not really used to talking to this age group, so I hope I will be comprehensible. My child is far beyond this age group, but the part of getting older is that you can say whatever you want, right?
Yes, ma'am. So I wanted to actually put in this part of conversation because you would probably want to explain things in a little more simpler manner, in a storytelling manner, to that particular age group, which I'm sure that you will appreciate and understand. And I've also taken the liberty of inviting a few questions from the students, which I always do. And I've told them that I will post them to ma'am, and then depending upon how the situation goes, she will decide to answer that or not. So I'm sure that you will find a little couple of interesting questions coming your way later in the program.
Absolutely. So if I am incomprehensible, please stop me and say, Rama, that doesn't make sense. Can you say it again? And exactly what age group are we talking about? What is the spread?
This age group, ma'am, will be students from, you can take it as from age group of 12 to 18, 18,
okay,
19.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, sure.
So probably the entire teen age group is what you're looking at.
Right. Okay. I look forward to learning. Yes.
All right, ma'am. My first poster to you would be, I first got to know about your work as you would also expect through We Are Like That Only, and I really enjoyed the book, and I think I read it pretty much around the same time it was released. But I had a second look at it in the context of this conversation also, obviously. And that is when I realized that you have actually used, references from the physics world itself. I don't remember whether it was in that book or in the other book called about the sequel of that book.
Yes.
You talk about escape velocity. That really caught my attention, saying that the Indian consumer or the new breed of people have that escape velocity thingy with them to move out of the clutches. Would you like to explain that a bit, ma'am, please?
Yes, when I look at the new India, particularly people who are not as well off as we are, I said that their entire mission in life is to give their children escape velocity into a better orbit. So you basically want to, my physics is very rusty, but you will fill in for my blunders. But the idea is to give them enough energy so that, and that energy comes in the form of knowledge, comes in the form of a little more money, comes in the form of better exposure. You know, information is a very powerful tool for people to imagine a better life. So imagine if you were in a little well, you would not be able to imagine anything other than the well. But it's when you get out into the garden that you imagine you can be a tree or a stone or a sky or something else. So taking all these together, they want an escape velocity that will catapult them into their children into a better orbit. That was one thing I used. The other that I say very often is, you know, people ask me, particularly foreign investors, when will India change? You know, we're not seeing any change. And I keep telling them that force is equal to mass into acceleration. And the change in India is a large mass of people moving in a small acceleration, but it unleashes the same amount of energy as a few people that are moving with a large acceleration. So those are the two places where people say, oh God, you're using physics analogies, but it explains it well.
Which was exactly the second analogy which I was about to refer to. So this, I'm sure students will be perfectly able to resonate with, because these are concepts which we teach at the very young age itself, the concept of escape velocity as well as that force is equal to mass into acceleration. So I use a similar analogy in teaching or while counseling the students for their studies also, because students always, not all, many students look for big changes to catapult them to higher results. But you have mentioned in your book itself that it need not be a very big thing. It can be a small thing happening over a long period of time. So would you say that kind of an approach is beneficial for a student perspective?
Absolutely right. Because I think there are no quantum leaps. Even I work with a lot of businesses like Infosys and businesses students will be familiar with. And we all say we want quantum growth. But you have to really be lucky to hit upon something that causes an explosive growth. But like all explosions, it comes with a lot of unwanted energy and heat and side effects that you can't control. So you're much better off if you have what we call steady, sustainable growth, because it again goes into exponentials, right? That if you grow slowly, then one day half the lotus pond is full, and the next day the full lotus pond is full, right? So if you continue to keep at it a little bit, it builds on itself. Or we also say that if India grew at, if India's economy, which is the total amount of money that India has as a country, if it grew at 7% a year because of compounding, and you can do the math, in 10 years, we would have added another huge India to India. You know, now that to me is the extraordinary power of small, steady, incremental, but the power of compounding. Compound interest is a lovely thing. Compound growth is a lovely thing. So compound intellectual energy is also a lovely thing. It feeds on itself.
Great. Thank you, ma'am. I mean, I think this particular piece of advice probably by itself will be worth watching several times over, students. You have directly heard from a person who actually interacts with the best of the Indian industry, advises them on market strategy, etc. And then she says that small, steady, incremental growth is what will add long-term value. Now, ma'am, in the case of businesses, I'm again referring to another section from one of your books, is that there is this disruptors which will come in, which will completely disrupt the way that we do business. But then in the long term, even these disruptors also will have, it is not often that we can have disruptors change the entire thing. It is always the slow, steady thing that will actually stick. Would you agree with that, ma'am?
Yes, I think it's the hare and the tortoise story also. The fables also say the same thing, that you have to, disruptors do come, and disruptors come because they think differently. I mean, as one of my clients says, they think differently. It's not about seeing things differently, but they think differently about that which everybody sees. But once you've got that disruption going, then it's only a matter of time before other people will copy you. So if you think you're going to have a lifelong advantage because you once disrupted, that's never going to happen. So I think you can get so it's like a curve that goes this way. You'll suddenly get a height and then it'll go again. But you have to, on a trend line, keep growing. So you will get the spurts, but on a trend line, you have to grow. It's even the way human adults grow, right? When you're 14, you'll get a growth spurt and you suddenly, the tiny child in class actually gets to be respectably tall. But after that, you will only grow in small bounds. And that's the way it is. You can't hang from a jungle gym and say, I'm going to add another foot. It doesn't work like that. The world doesn't work like that. Thank God for that.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, for the first relevant question from the students, because I thought that will be the best thing to do actually post this to you. The first question, which I think I should ask, is that, ma'am, could you tell me what exactly do you do?
What exactly do I do?
Yeah.
Okay, so I do 3 things. Well, firstly, I sleep a lot and I read a lot of fiction. I watch a lot of Netflix. Whatever time is left over from that. And I'm just joking, students. I don't think that's what you can afford to do when you get to be as old as I am. But one part of my life is about advising companies on how to grow through doing better for their customers. So if you are a bank and every bank is like every other bank, what are the services you should offer? Measure whether you are serving your customers well. What are the unmet requirements or needs that people have always wanted but have not been able to articulate? So it's really looking at the world of customers, serving them better, so that as we often say, you will add, the dharma of business is to add value to your customer and to be able to gain as a result of adding value to the customer. So if you don't add value to the customer, you will not add value to yourself, right? So what I do is I work with a lot of companies and try and help them do this. One part of it is a lot of foreign companies want to come into India. So they think that they do maths differently. They say if every Indian ate half a gram of noodles, then we would have a market of noodles that's bigger than Italy, where they actually eat noodles every day. But that's not the truth, because all Indians will not be eating half a gram of noodles every day. So I explain to them what India is like. That's my book, We're Like That Only. I tell them what India is like. I tell them what I call the pain and the gain of coming into India, so that they can make up their minds about how they want to play. So we call it where to play and how to win. Do you want to play kabaddi, cricket, kho-kho? Do you want to create your own new game called Khoket? And if you're going to play cricket, which playground? Are you going to play 2020? Are you going to play test cricket? And how will you strategize to win? And how will you put that strategy together? It's not enough to say, oh, I'm going to win through spin bowlers and a good fielding. What does that actually mean, and when will you use it? So I help companies think through all this. That's one part of what I do. The other part of what I do is that all companies are basically, they take public money in order to grow. So they take they call it share trading. So they take money from all of us who buy shares, and that's called public money, right? So because they're using public money, somebody has to supervise them to see that they are being honest, they're using that public money wisely, and that the company is being well run. This supervision, it's like the class monitor only, or it's like the class teacher who supervises your project work and so on and so forth. Not supposed to do it, but supposed to see what's happening. We call it nose in and fingers out. So that is called the board of a company. So that's what boards do. So boards are typically 7 to 10 people who are elected by shareholders. We meet once a quarter. We review the accounts. We see that the accounts are okay. No one has misstated. No one is claiming to have earned more money than they actually have. We look at whether the chief executive has done a good job. We also do our own grading and rating systems. So that's the board of the company. It is meant to supervise the company, which typically takes public money. And the third thing that I do is I'm a professor of practice. That's what they call people like me who have no PhDs. You have to have a PhD to be a professor in a big institution. But in order to get in people like me who are practitioners with no PhDs, they create a sort of cadre of professors called Professor of Management Practice. Professor of Practice is a widely used term. And in a sense, it's like, I live in Bombay, but I go to Ahmedabad and I teach in my term. I offer 2 courses. So that's the third thing that I do. And there's a fourth thing that I do. I don't do it all myself. I think you have to learn to collaborate and do it with other people. And I have what is called a think tank. It's a research center, which I run with a very good one of India's best statisticians, my colleague, Dr. Shukla. So we actually go out and do surveys of households to find out how do Indian people, how do they earn, how do they spend, how do they save, how do they live, how do they think, how many people have access to water, electricity, transport. So we call it the people view. So we actually go to the people. It's not the government saying, I have done so much, right? It's like actually testing students to get the answer. It's not the teacher saying, I have taught so many hours. After Ajay sir has taught you for so many hours, we want to know, what did you learn? And that's really what the people view delivers. So that's what I do.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. I think a quick understanding would have helped. Second question that would have, I have shortlisted to ask you from the student perspective is, ma'am, could you give an example of your work that we as students can see in the marketplace right now?
Ooh. I don't know. I don't think I would be able to say anything is my particular work. But one example of what I do is I am chairperson of what is called the Customer Service Committee of the board of ICICI Bank. So all customer complaints that come to the bank, we review them once a quarter. So if your bank is doing better for you, or if you have a place to complain to get redress for the bank, from the bank, that is something that I do. In the past, a lot of stuff I've done is to help products come into the market. So many of the products that you see that you commonly use are probably products I would have done market research for at some point in time or the other. And what market, so it's actually literally pick any product, pick something, I would have probably worked on it at some point in time. I work for hospitals, I work for banks, I work for soap companies, I work for retailers, basically solve problems. Sorry,
All right.
That's an indirect answer, but it's hard to say.
That's fine, ma'am. I think that question also has roots in the way I have explained, because when I said that ma'am is a market research practitioner, obviously students got back to me for a primary clarification. And then I told them in my own words, what is market research from a consumer durable or a consumer FMCG point of view.
Right. Okay. Right. Yes.
So probably they were looking at, okay, what is the mascot that you have created, kind of a question is what they probably had thought about.
Yeah, to quickly clarify, I'm actually a problem solver. So I'm a doctor of brands and products. So pick any brand. So once upon a time, many years ago, there was a brand called Nirma. It was priced at, I don't know, 5 rupees when Surf was priced at 30 rupees. And Nirma kept growing and growing and growing. And Surf was actually the big boy, the market leader. It's like someone who's first in class suddenly getting disrupted. It's what you see in the US Open, in the tennis today, right? 2 people who don't have a ranking at all have actually come to the finals. So the Hindustan Lever, the company that owned Surf, said, how did this happen? How does he do it? How can he sell so cheap? How does he make a profit? So I basically spent a year looking at the business. How does he do it? What does he do? You try and construct what his business looks like. You come back and you compare it with your business. And so as a result of learning all this, then Surf actually created another product called Wheel, which you're probably familiar with in the market. And Wheel then started competing with Nirma. So it could be something like that. Sometimes it could be, we are really worried that this particular hospital company is getting somehow, no matter what we do, people still complain that our service is bad and we are not good value for money. So then you study what people mean by value, what adds value to people, what makes people feel these people are not adding value to me. What have you done? So we basically divide people into two groups: those that are very happy with the business, those are not very happy with the hospital experience. And then we analyze, what did people who were happy, what did they have? What did they understand? What did they get right? What are they saying? And people who are not happy, what are they saying? So that what we can do is then boost the happiness, the factors that caused happiness, and work on the factors that don't cause happiness. So it's things like that. So it's problem solving. It's like a doctor of company problems. But like doctors have specializations, my specialization is in understanding customers to solve company problems.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. The next question, I had a good hard look at it. I'm sure you will be able to immediately place from which profile this question has come. But then it is an innocent question, so I'll shoot off. Because I always encourage students to look at the profile of the person and study a bit before actually sending it. So the student said, ma'am, we have seen a lot of pictures of you, and you always wear the Indian sari. Do you have any aversion to Western clothes?
I have no aversion to anything at all. But I find, firstly, that I'm most comfortable in Indian clothes because that's my generation. So it's interesting you ask, because when India started opening to the world in 1991, we all started going abroad on work. And so at that time, your generation is coming from a strong India. Our generation came from an India before we were the IT kings, before we had a lot of good things going, before we were such a big economy, right? Most people thought we were the land of snake charmers and elephants. And so when you went to do business abroad, my friends and colleagues used to tell me that if you wear a sari and if you wear a bindi and if you wear all those things, you're never going to get taken seriously as a global citizen in the world. And that was important. At that time, I experimented. But if you're not used to wearing Western clothes, and I think that's an important larger life lesson, you have to do what makes you most comfortable and confident, because otherwise your brain will also not work. My brain will not work if I wear a skirt. I will be more concerned about whether my legs are looking okay or not than I will be concerned with the brain. Now, one of my friends told me, and it's interesting. So when I went abroad, I started sort of trying to wear more, the trousers and the kurta, long kurta, so that I looked a little bit Western. But someone told me there that no matter what you do, you will look Indian. So you can try and disguise it as much as you like, but you will look Indian. So I then said, to hell with it. And then gradually, when I was invited to talk about India around the world, I found that the sari actually added to my brand. People were interested in seeing it the way it was. So that is the reason why I've been sticking with the sari. I have no aversion at all to Western clothes, but I do feel that people have to think more carefully. For example, when I wear Western clothes, I find that I lose my innate sense of style. I can look in a mirror and I can't tell what's right and what's wrong. I know something is off, but I don't know what it is. When I'm wearing a sari, I know something's off. I know very quickly. The diagnosis is very easy because it's an instinct. It's what Daniel Kahneman, the great Nobel Prize winner, calls thinking fast and thinking slow. It's what immediately hits your head. So I think fast about me, about my clothes, about everything that way. So yeah, I would love to wear Western clothes, but I neither have, as we say, when I was young, I had the figure, I didn't have the guts. Now I'm old, I have the guts, but I don't have the figure. So I find also one most important thing is that when you dress differently, people will forgive you for thinking differently because there is no expectation from you. So I use my Indian clothes to great advantage around the world, because when I walk into a meeting looking like this, they don't know what I know, what I do, what language I speak, how I think. So I use it to be able to express points of view that are contrary to them, and they will not take it so badly because I'm different.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And very nice that you brought out the word brand, because there was a second part to that statement. Is it part of brand, Rama madam? That was the second part of the question.
It is part of brand. You're absolutely right. My hair up, my bindi has become a part of my brand. That does not mean brands don't change and brands don't adapt. But it is expected of you. But it's not just because it's my brand. I do it now because it's a differentiator. If brands have to work very hard at differentiation means that you have something that is different about you, which is positive. You can be different and wear a clown uniform to a meeting, but it may not be positively different. So I find that as more and more people have stopped wearing saris, when I'm the only sari wearer in a big hall, I get noticed much more. When I used to go to international conferences, if you walk the corridors, they would look at you and say, "Oh, this seems interesting. Here she is again in a beautiful sari. Let's go and hear what she has to say." I don't think they would do that if I wore jeans. So yes, it is part of my brand, but brands change as well.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. The next question is actually from my side. It is not often that I also get to speak to somebody of your stature on a conversation like this. So it is a practice that I have been, following regularly in my teaching over the last 25 years. Because of my interest in quizzing, which I have shared with you, I have been a professional quiz master also for a long time. And because of my interest in quizzing, I have always included these knowledge events and quizzes, etc., as part of my training itself. And because of that, I have always encouraged students to relate what they have to learn with what they have already learned. For example, one of the examples that I can give you is, for example, when students have to learn about ATP, that is the adenosine triphosphate, I say, okay, for the students who are interested in sport, I say that, okay, ATP stands for the Association of Tennis Professionals, ATP. And then quickly there is an association and the students immediately latch on to this. Now, just for a ratification point of view from a market research professional, does this sort of look exciting to you as a protocol of teaching?
Yeah, it absolutely does. I think it promotes association and very quick recall. I also think that analogies, similes, which is what we've been talking about so far, right? Analogies, similes, mnemonics, little things that you can think about. They actually promote even conceptual understanding. So, for example, segmentation, I always say that Hinduism figured segmentation out a long time back. You have 5 forms of the goddess Durga. One is militant, one is, goody two shoes, one is calm, one is not. So that's market segmentation. So when you say that, a lot of people get it and they say, oh, for example, I say to foreigners that Indian consumers, they say your consumers are so confused. How can you do this and that? And I always say that this or that is never part of India. I'm sure your parents tell you that you have to study brilliantly and you have to be a good child and you have to be bold and you have to be kind and you have to be this and you have to be that. So India is always and. We don't do or. So if you go back to the avatars, then immediately you get it. So yeah, I believe so. All kinds of, or even the way people, the other day, a very elderly friend of my mother's, she described how she understood the sequence of inauspicious times, Rahu Kalam or something. She calls it mother saw father wearing turban Thursday, Monday, Wednesday, the sequence. Or 30 days had September, April, June, and November. I'm always confused. So you count on your knuckles and you say, is it 30 days or 31 days? So yeah, that's a good way.
Good. Another one which you might enjoy is that the students ask is that we discuss sports or movies during the break in between periods. So when you go for this big meetings, etc., what do you discuss with high-level people during lunch breaks?
Oh, we have a lot of fun. We also discuss movies. We discuss, I'm not a great sports fan, but forget the break. Before every meeting begins, if there has been a sports event or whatever, it could be cricket, it could be Wimbledon, it could be anything, there will be, and usually I'm the only woman in the room, so there will be 10 people having a discussion animatedly about the match that happened, which I never got to see. So I used to tell my husband in the morning that, can you just give me 3 points before I go to this meeting? And don't give me rubbish points like we won, that's good to know. But also, can you give me some sophisticated points like iska batting aise tha, so that I would actually know. So yeah, we certainly discuss sport, we discuss movies. A lot of people have a good sense of humor. We discuss politics. We discuss the world. I'm sure if we had physical meetings, we would be discussing Afghanistan and the US before we actually went in. If it's election time, we're discussing elections. So yeah, we do. We have a lot of laughs too. We discuss each other. We sometimes discuss our children.
Good, ma'am. Ma'am, we have almost touched 30 minutes. I would like to now throw it open to you to say, if you, like I said, you are addressing pretty much the entire teen generation of India, the group that follows us on the channels. What would be your advice or pointers or direction for the young aspirational India of this age group?
I think the India of this age group can be, I think the options are far, far, far greater. You can be anything you want to be. And I seriously mean that. And I also think that in my time, the world was not porous. If you grew up to be an engineer, you had to live to be an engineer. My brother went to IIT 2 years later. He said, I hate this. And my father said, too bad. You made your bed, you lie in it. You got to finish your 5 years. And once an engineer, always an engineer. Once a doctor, always a doctor. Now I'm finding doctors in the IAS. I'm finding engineers who don't want to be engineers, who are writing poetry. You see a lot of, Chetan Bhagat is a IIM Ahmedabad graduate who's chosen to be a fiction writer. Your own teacher, Ajay, is an MBA who has chosen to indulge his passion of teaching. So I think truly there are many alternatives. So I would say, first, find your calling, your passion, your calling. Maybe passion is a big word. Find what you want to do, what you like to do. And then there are many paths that will open up to you. It's like a tree diagram. At every fork, you will find 3-4 paths. And so I think, one, you need to have a good understanding of who you are. If you want to do things because it's fashionable and everybody else and your friends are doing it, I think you'll be miserable, because you have to be true to what you're good at doing. It doesn't mean you can't develop things you're not good at doing. But if you are not a people's person and you go to a sales job because that is what all your friends are doing, you will be miserable, because every day it leverages what doesn't come naturally to you. So we can find your calling of that which comes naturally to you. I think that it would be absolutely terrific. If you love maths and you choose to become a lawyer, then you have to go and become a corporate lawyer, tax lawyer, something lawyer, so your maths will work for you. But if you decide to become a criminal lawyer, then nobody wants to, there's not that much opportunity. So I would say to you, focus on your calling, focus on training your mind, focus on understanding yourself. And success in life is always, as I tell a lot of young people and old people, is the fit between what you want and what is available. So people come and tell me, which of these is a good profession to go to? And I'm saying it depends on the fit between what you want, how you want to spend your life, and what is available out there. If that fit comes, it's like you and your best friend, right? If the fit is good, it's terrific. If the fit is bad, that best friend may be cool to have as a best friend, but it's very frustrating, right? So my advice to you is, one is train your mind, be aware of yourself, try and find what excites you, what is your calling. And as you go along, there will be enough opportunities to switch, to change. So don't be afraid to switch, but every time you switch, it has to build on what you already have. It's the concept of what we call collateral. Collateral is you put your house down and the bank will give you money for your house. If you have no house, unfortunately, it will not give you the money. So similarly, if you've had 5 years of studying engineering, the collateral you have is a brain that has been wired to think like an engineer. You can take that and you can put it into philosophy. That's the way your brain is wired, right? My daughter has studied to be an economist. I've studied physics. I can see we approach problems very differently. Mine is a linear, take a problem, break it into sub-problems, solve each piece separately and put the answer together. An economist thinks differently. They think macro variables, they think system design, they think solutions in a different way. People who do design thinking think differently. So core area of interest, train your brain to think that way. I think once you're there, you can take it wherever you want. My husband had a student called Harsha Bogle, went to IIM Ahmedabad, absolutely top notch. Joined him in advertising in a company called Rediffusion. And after 2-3 years, Harsha said, I'm going to go off to cricket. Now, after all the time, and you should get him on your show, he's a lovely person. And after some time of following cricket and everything, he and his wife have a company that basically takes examples from sports and helps companies become high performance. So he's taken his collateral of his IIM degree with his understanding of sports, and he's looked at it through the lens of what he was trained to do. And he's come up with, his wife is also an IIM graduate, and he's come up with a series of consulting help projects which really help people grow by taking the world of sport and bringing its learning here. So there are plenty of opportunities. So don't worry about opportunities. Just focus on getting trained into something and a mind train.
All right. Thank you so much, ma'am. It's been a great session. We have hit the time, and I'm sure you would love to go on. And we have a lot of things to munch on from whatever we have discussed. Once again, from all of us here at the Physics Chamber, thanks for the wonderful session that you have shared with us. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ajay, and good luck to everybody and best wishes. Thank you.